Last seen falling into a canal. Like all small independent publishers, Lamb was a twinkly-eyed saint, his skin as soft as cream. With every fart, a peal of girlish laughter was his morning promise to the world. Literature ran through his veins, chased out on the end of a broom by his ruling fluids. Any Scot, pulling a grin of sheepish enterprise, would pay Lamb a royalty or hear from his people. Tough times for the book business, Lamb would explain, riffling the wad with a grin of sheepish enterprise. As has been reported outside these pages, publishing had dwindled to a bloodless and forlorn territorial squabble over culture's prosthetic bowel, the pinworm's sorry endgame. That Lamb got involved with no higher aspirations than love, love, love was grounds alone to recommend him as an unimpeachable sweetheart. The man's fictional sensitivities were beyond measure. I personally saw the first rumour of prose elicit the faraway stare of a final Mohican. Then came the tears. Manuscripts took baptism at his head's holy nozzle. Faithful to its magic, Lamb approved only those pages he had blubbered over. Sub-editors were instructed to discard any remaining legible and type up the mush. Job done, he would take to the rooftop, blink damply over Union Canal, and release a suite of feathered sighs. This much Lamb knew. Persevering with a trade that caused such sorrow marked his fraternity with the retrieved halves of surfers vowing to safeguard sharks. By this ministry of sighs and sobs his own sea rhythms rolled, and however the tempest buffeted, come dawn, old Lamb would be back in the water. Against the advice of concerned friends, he exposed himself to more creative writing than was professionally necessary. Every open mic night in the city knew the dark ripple signalling its audience had been infiltrated. Soon enough, Lamb's exact whereabouts were common knowledge. His appreciative convulsions reliably outthrashed even the compare's giddying shrieks. Blocking the exits with his tear-stained bulk, Lamb would grip the arms of departing poets in the manner of a demon-purged shepherd's daughter, and then never publish any of them out of sheer humility. With a big enough paddle, he could be buttered into offering advice, provided he could do so flushed as a plum, one shoe on point and shyly burrowing. Well, golly, I guess when it comes to telling stories, I think words tend to get in the way. A plucked peacock might be unrecognisable, but gee, it's the truth. With Lamb, egalite was not only dyed in the wool, but tattooed inside the thigh, and consequently he never altered this advice, irrespective of the author's background, situation, or original query. Transparency was his first principle, and he claimed to be too pure for a second. To read was to enshroud, and under his dominion the horizon's steeped airs wisped to a hill. Along the way, Lamb found economy of language conferred a pleasingly righteous pragmatism. Where other characters loved and lost, his went and did. If he were only here to read these lines, I honestly think he would have farted, and then admonished me with a cherubic giggle. Oh dear boy, no, all this could be said in a mere 6 words. He was a small, independent publisher. Allow me then to present the man in prose he might agree with. Lamb stepped into the sunshine, eating a big bun. And winced. Light, throbbing from the canal, brandished its silver sharp across his eyes. A challenge. The expiring dazzle made leaps around its nexus, spent energies of creation fussing their object as they faded. Once the canal resumed its drowsy spangle, against it could be seen a beckoning silhouette. In a moment, Lamb was quayside, Bun was scoffed. The figure awaiting him was a young man intensely agitated. His nod of welcome was a single frame spat out of a time-lapse of other possibilities. Blinking several times a second, with every blink he switched his head. He seethed with calculations, entertaining the best for an instant, smothering most in the cradle. Amid this, Lamb sought an opening into which he could squeeze his sympathies. For he knew the lad, an outcast from the fold. Days prior, Lamb had declined a collection of his stories. Appeared to take it well, he thought at the time. While Lamb took charge of the crying, the author just sat, quite impassive, turning to the window to stare dreamily over the canal. Since then, how had his views evolved? It wasn't uncommon for rejects to rematerialise on the boardwalk below Lamb's offices. He knew these unhappy phantoms by their blurred outline. Hitting turbulence as they entered objective reality, they underwent days of defiant shaking. Another variety lingered soulful by the water to lay a mental wreath where hope was killed. Both visitations ended with sobs of gratitude buried in the shoulder of Lamb. A shoulder that was being offered once again as Lamb leaned forward, pouting paternally up through his golden fringe. "If it's a reckoning you're after, son," he asked, "what's with the disguise?" Perhaps he shouldn't have mentioned it, but as disguises go, it was a little overcooked. The kid had bleached his hair to translucence, roots showing like a ribby shipwreck through fog. Grease paint and whiskers streaked the face, and the nose was an obvious fake, a good inch right of the real one. The whole ensemble offended credibility, and here Lamb recognised the hand of the author. Placid enough to begin with, his stories had presented vignettes of modern life candid with articles of general observation. Lamb read this far with eyes as wet as kisses. But each in turn would be trashed in foolish havoc. Our author had learned just one form of conflict resolution, ruin, and he reaped the merry hell out of it, bleakly predictable as an improv rookie's fingers succumbing to pistolry. Ruin came at the hands of a sort of doofus ex machina calling himself Stokes Waverley. Apparently the unchallenged god of this fictional universe, Stokes Waverley wouldn't appear until the human story generated a crease or two, at which point he would coast down from the heavens, a thunderbolt spinning in his palm, or hurtle shockingly into a scene littering brick dust. One time, the kindly innkeeper of the tale struck an Olympian pose mid-sentence and sprayed his listeners with gore. In his place now stood Stokes Waverley, and having flexed off his flesh suit, he cried, "Me all along!" kicking off the usual pages of inanity. Tiresomely thorough, Stokes Waverley would later waste the room he had appeared in, the building containing that room, the neighbourhood containing that building, the town containing that neighbourhood, what remained of Scotland, what remained of Britain, mainland Europe, and what remained of the world. His one deviation from this methodically reiterated routine was his never-explained sparing of one male and one female member of a species of Scottish wildlife. Every ending played out the same way. A jubilant Stokes Waverley would swallow the universe, then turn, a wide-eyed seal under each arm, to address the reader. "Behold and learn from these examples. Truth sinks in, but nonsense tramples." Independent and small he may have been, but Lamb felt a publisher should behave as a reader's ministering angel. His sacramental duty was to deliver the word, spilling as little on the chin as might be helped. To see his dependents brutalised with such single-minded relish was therefore troubling, and replaying the atrocities of Stokes Waverley as his author stood there, insanely arrayed, reflected light tigering the made-up face, Lamb at last began to fear for his own well-being. It had not escaped his notice that with every cough and whistle, the author was drawing them into closer confidence and steering that confidence towards the Canal. His vocalizations were wordless but emotionally coherent, like the ramping pleas of a washing machine. Anxious of attention, he kept lifting his collar or delicately adjusting his noses. When passers-by came within range, he became hectic and jolly, hopping from one foot to the other, playing his flute, with an extraordinary expression, like he couldn't believe how the jingle tasted. If Lamb tried to soothe or contribute, he was silenced with a desperate glare. During one of these musical outbursts, matters escalated. Lamb's first ginger hip swivel into dancing along with the author was suppressed by a forceful smooch. Too surprised to react, Lamb remained frozen in boogie for several seconds, long enough for a duck and its ribbon of young to cruise by. When he finally pushed the assailant off, he encountered urgent eyes, broken whiskers, and a nose that had swung up to 2:15. A breeze set a wrinkle in the Canal's robe, and the boardwalk emptied. For the first time, the author was eerily still. The only movement came at the dandelion brink of his hair, where it dishevelled into brightness, and over his shoulder the approach of a swan, snug on the seat of its bow wave. Violence was assured, and Lamb stood in the chill of its dorsal shade. But I am proud to report that he confronted martyrdom with a peaceful spirit. Calmly he foresaw a mile south his own body being hauled from waters brown as tea, heard a honk of anguish from a well-read frogman's snorkel. "It's him all right, Chief. I'd know that grin anywhere." Fathoming its loss, the literary world would concede a touch of the inevitable. For wasn't he always forging upstream? Weren't we, his friends and comrades, forever catching the spray with our plaudits? Dragged to the vaulty deeps by one of the very sea-swept souls he fought to save, he fulfilled that saintly twinkle all right, and became our industry's sacrificial... But when the moment arrived, it left Lamb on dry land. Turned out it was all about the swan. The author waited until it drew level, and then with a yell, he sprang. Lamb thought he saw a look of outraged recognition on the bird's face before they both went under. A magnificent battle ensued. It had that special intimacy, only realised in a clash of old foes. In a spill of paint and feathers, they writhed as one, and the water boiled with turnarounds. At one point, a cudgel was produced, by which combatant it was impossible to tell. And the noise. "Me all along," the author shouted, driving his elbow into the swan's groin. Bugling screams from the bird. It had its neck wrapped around its enemy's throat, madly pummeling the writer's head with its own. Then it was over. The fighters submerged and were never seen again. Lamb looked as hard as he could, but the surface of the canal dulled like a smoked glass. When eventually it cleared, all he could see was a group of sunken weeds, each unspooling a shrug. "It's like I told you, he fell," Lamb said, with a surliness that would live on in the detective's memory. "He fell, and that's the end of it.